it's all good at Applewood. It's also always good when we have Patrick Johnston on from the province and theprovince.com, who is full of smiles. You clearly have been watching the Swedish team at the World Juniors. That's what's put you in such a good mood. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Jonathan Lekkerimäki, the star of the tournament, or whatever we're saying at this point. Yeah. That kid can finish. Holy smokes.
I mean, it does have you dreaming. We've been bandying about what that means for the Canucks going forward a little bit. What do you think the Canucks think of Jonathan Lekkerimäki? Because it's been a tale of 12 months and then 12 months. And the last 12 months have been great, but the prior 12 not so great. But they are kids and they develop, and it's trending in the right direction. What do you think they think of him, given that they do want to improve this season?
Well, they look at in terms of value, you mean like trade chip.
I mean, is that somebody that they're willing to depart?
Well, I am of two minds. They obviously, we know they want to add a winger or a top six forward. That is clear. To do that will be an expensive thing to do. And so inherently you end up looking at prospects and what you have and how the rest of your roster fills out. At the same time, I have been thinking about this for a while. I think no team wants to trade at first, but if they are going to be where they're going to probably finish, which is going to be, that pick will be in the high 20s. I think that first round pick is something they're if you're trying to do your hierarchy of willingness to trade things, that's definitely above trading Lekkerimäki. I think back a lot to that conversation I had with Jim Rutherford last month, where we talked about the OEL buyout and the impact that's going to have on their cap situation. And it is very clear that they are at least planning on Lekkerimäki and hopefully Willander, being guys that can be in the NHL lineup, not next year, but the year after that, when that buyout really starts to ramp up. That he is a player. They need their young guys on ELCs to help them manage their way through this situation that I think they know they created for themselves, but they believe they can do it. I mean, they look at how things have gone with the current prospects, with the lower end prospects that are in Abbotsford, and they say, listen, both these guys, we believe in our model, we believe in our system, we think it's going to work, and these guys need to be Vancouver Canucks in a season or two. So I think that as much as anything is driving the thinking. Of course, if you can add a player right now who will drive you closer to the Stanley Cup, I think they will think long and hard about that. I don't think it is a thing they would very much like to do, though. They know the price is there, but I don't know if that's a player really they want to give up, given what they need in the years to come.
Patrick, the shot is undeniable, and we've known that for a while about Lekkerimäki. I guess the question is, and it gets asked of anybody that performs on the bigger ice coming over to North America, time and space. Yeah. Can he get that shot away? Can he score those goals? And is there maybe a cautionary tale a little bit? Like Brock Besser broke into the league, advertisers having a great shot, and he scored a bunch of goals early. But now you look at Brock and the way that he's scoring. Is it just as simple as saying this guy's a scorer and a shooter? He's going to be able to do it on any kind of ice.
Well, I'll go even further back, right? Like that was the thing. I think in hindsight, we realized it was a problem with Jake Virtanen's game, right? Jake, you look at his highlight reels from junior, and all his goals were scored with him facing no one between him and the goalie, right? Like he beat defensemen up ice and then just skated his way to the net and didn't have to deal with any pressure defensively. And then he got to the NHL, and even with his big body, he couldn't figure it out. So here's Jonathan Lekkerimäki, who's a slight guy who will need to use his hockey sense to create scoring opportunities for himself. And you're right, like Brock Besser has figured out. I asked him this last week, and he didn't. Oh no, it's all just good fortune and blah blah blah. It's like, come on, Brock, you've made yourself a better player. You are scoring greasy goals that weren't necessarily there the last couple seasons, and a lot of that is being hockey smart, being strong, finding the seams. Rick Tocchet talked about how good he is at finding the seams. Lekkerimäki is going to have to do that. Now, one of the strong things we have seen from him this year, after realistically a tough season last year, is if you watch the way he is scoring goals in Sweden. Now, yes, there are a lot of goals like the ones he scored today where they're from the outside, quick release, picking spots. You're playing against goalies in the World Juniors who are good, but they're not NHL goalies. And if you're going to score against goalies who are much better than you've seen before. You can't just do that one thing. And what we've seen from him in the SHL this year is we have seen him scoring from other spots. I remember early on, he scored a couple nice goals in the exhibition season in Sweden. And you're like, okay, that's nice. Now I want to see it, on top of the crease. I want to see him score from the slot. I want to see him score under pressure. And we have seen evidence of that. Good. That's progress. That's what you want. He's talented enough that you'd hope that that's where he would be. But obviously, it sounds like he's going to come at least to the AHL next year, and he'll have to show he can do that at the AHL level. And then obviously the ultimate test comes after that.
He scored a couple of goals doing the JT Miller. Am I blind, or have they been doing this for recent years? But I have seen more of this exiting the zone as a shooter and then skating downhill into right. Is that just new? Or have I been blind to that?
I mean, it's a thing it's been highlighted to me in the past. If you were paying attention, at least in the early days of the Edmonton Oilers power play with Connor McDavid, a lot of what they were trying to do was create essentially rush opportunities. It's a bit of a rush scenario. And yeah, that Miller thing reminds me of what the Oilers were trying to do with McDavid. Obviously different quality of player, but yes, a strength of Miller is that shot, is that coming in off the wing, changing your angle a little bit, giving the goalie something to track. It's better than a static shooter, I think, is the thinking. So yeah, seeing Lekkerimäki do that is remnant. You're exactly right. It reminds me of Miller, which reminds me of McDavid. So there we go.
Hey, good models
absolutely.
to work from.
JT Miller, one of the best. He is one of the best power play players in the league. Like that is something he is very good at. And so you could do worse than model yourself after JT Miller.
He's one of the best power play players in the league. He's not one of the best penalty killers. And I think that's been apparent for a while now. And I don't know if you saw the tweet that I had yesterday, but since December the 5th, so basically a month now, Canucks penalty kill is 6th best in the National Hockey League, which is a far cry from where it's been over the last couple of years. And the biggest switch to me in all of that is they got Pia Suter back. Teddy Bluger's had a run of games now since his injury and joining the team, but they have turned the penalty killing duty over to Suter, to Bluger, to Joshua, and Nils Zaman, and JT and Elias Pettersson. They sometimes get a little mop-up duty at the end of PKs, but they are not the primary penalty killers, and proof's in the pudding here. The penalty kill's been pretty damn good for the last month or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I think you want to give the player the chance. I think, it was the rhetoric early in the season was that JT says, I want to be good at this. And they gave him some runway, and it didn't work out. Maybe he can come back to it. Maybe he can figure it out. I mean, obviously we know how much he talks with Rick Tocchet and tries to learn about the game, and I think has improved elements of his game this year. But I think at the end of the day, what do you want Miller to do? You want him scoring points. You don't want him burning energy, killing penalties. I think that's the other thing, is that realistically, as much as he might want to be that 22-minute-a-night horse, you'd rather him focusing in on using his energy on offense, finding goals, setting up Brock Besser, doing all these things. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the Dakota Joshua was signed to be a penalty killer, right? Like every single one of those guys was signed to help the penalty kill. And I don't find it surprising now that they are running with all these guys who are said to be penalty killing specialists that things are going well. And stick with it, stick with what's working. The defensive end of the game is something they do need to dial in, and Rick Tocchet's talked a lot about it. But as this team moves forward, especially as maybe some of those goals disappear that we think will happen, they're going to have to start winning 1-goal games, right? Like a lot of these wins have been by multiple goals. They're going to be a lot more 1-goal games, and they want to win those games. They don't want to end up in overtime. They want to end up, losing things late. They want to make sure that they're dialed in, and that penalty kill is going to be a huge part of that story.
First time chatting with you since the holidays, and it was a weird holiday break for Elias Pettersson, who saw rumors swirling, and they were kind of out of left field and weird, and all this stuff, of course, would come to an end if he got a contract. Yeah. I saw articles written today about Willie Nylander using the All-Star break as sort of a not a pressure point, because there's really no pressure point there, but as a goal to get the deal done, and that's what the Nylander camp wants. Do you think the Pettersson camp secretly wants something like that too, or are they willing to push it to an actual pressure point like the trade deadline or even the end of the season?
Well, if you can believe it, I chatted with Pat Brisson yesterday, and he told me, I said, where are things? It's still quiet. The generally they've been not pushing. I think they've sort of made it clear sort of where things are at, but like they haven't been pushing the tempo on this, and things are still pretty quiet. I do think the idea of, sort of the pressure points obviously are the summer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the ultimate pressure point, because in the end, if he just takes his QO, he can walk to unrestricted free agency and pick his thing next year. To me, in the end, they know they have. It's really kind of on them, on Elias Pettersson. What does he want to do now? I think I've said this before. I think it comes back to that basic assessment. He said it's about winning. What's the culture? What's the environment around the team? And what does he want out of this? I think he really does want to win championships. Not every player is in this to win championships, but this is a player who wants to be at the top of the heap, who really feels that in his blood, I think. And so that to me is the ultimate thing. What is this team doing? How does he feel about everything? How does he feel the culture of the team? Is the team going to go somewhere? And right now they're in a great direction. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a slow burn on this one. And then suddenly will come together. I mean, it's not like there's going to be all these complicated. It will be clear what his value is, what the term is. Obviously, the longer it goes, the bigger the contract. The shorter it goes, lower the AAV. There are all kinds of considerations in here, but I think it's going to be one of those ones that it will probably be very quiet, and then all of a sudden it's going to come together, or it ultimately won't.
It's fascinating, though. It's fascinating the timing of all of this. And look, the Pettersson camp has the right. It takes two sides to negotiate, and they can slow play this. But the Vancouver Canucks are trying to be a competitive hockey team on the ice this year with so many guys on expiring deals that they have to have an eye to next year. And, at the trade deadline this year, like we've heard that the Zadorov camp is looking for big money. Like in a perfect world, you'd like to know what your biggest piece is going to cost you. And then underneath that, you've got other guys. Hronek obviously is going to need a sizable contract as well. So it does put this is the difficulty of running basically in three lanes of long-term, short-term, and the here and now with a competitive team.
And you know what? That's exactly where my mind was going to, Jeff. And I'll make it a question for you here, Peaches. How much do you think players are aware of that in today's day and age? Yesterday's player, 20 years ago, they lived only in the present. I really do believe that they would see their team at fourth in the overall standings. You go, we're a great team. I'm happy. I think today's players a little bit more savvy. Certainly the agents would probably speak it to them and say, listen, this is what's coming down the pike. They've got a bunch of UFAs. Are they more savvy to the medium and long term, do you think?
I think they certainly like certainty, right? They want to know what they're doing. I mean, this comes down to everything I think I've been talking about in terms of, whether you talk about the way Rick Tocchet handles people, like the sort of the emotional intelligence, understanding that they want to know what's going on around them. I mean, Rick Tocchet's amazing at this. There's a reason why he clearly has so many friends around the NHL. The way he interacts with people, the way he gets along with people, that's why he's connected so well with this group. I mean, these players are used to being in the middle of their process. They know why they're doing things. They know what's coming ahead of them. They are trying to anticipate what needs to happen next. And so, I mean, Elias Pettersson is a guy that I think is, you look at when he gets asked about sort of other players, you think about the one of the things that was in the long interview with Elliot Friedman at the beginning of the season was talking about, what's your lineup? Like who are your guys? You're trying to win a gold medal for Sweden. Final minute or whatever it is, you need a goal. Who's it going to be? And he has a real process. He knows who everybody is, right? He is not a guy that sits back and goes, "Oh, I don't know who I'm playing tonight. We'll see what happens." that surely extends. He will be looking around. I mean, he is paying attention to all this stuff. He is not one of these guys. He doesn't talk a lot about it, but he knows what the conversation is. And so he is in the middle. I mean, obviously you have agents, and in general, you want them to guide you to where you want to be. And he made an intentional switch to JP Perry and Pat Brisson a couple of years ago because he wanted the best, right? He wanted that full service agency. He wanted to have everything going. And he saw how much money these guys have gotten for their players. That was an intentional choice. All due respect to Michael Deutsch, who is his original agent and a good guy, and I think has a long reputation as a good, solid agent, but he went with the biggest guys around. And that was intentional. Like that, this is a guy that clearly knows what he wants and has put it on his agents. I mean, they've got it for their players before. You can look at Tyler Myers, right? Look at any of the long list of guys elsewhere that they've had on their list. Roberto Luongo. Like, there are guys, they've gotten their players what they've wanted over the years, and I will fully expect that Elias Pettersson will be very happy once this all gets settled.
Another example coming up in hashtags of Rick Tocchet's character that you sort of alluded to there. Yeah, how much do you think he's had an effect on changing the culture in the room and changing accountability and all that sort of stuff?
I think a huge amount. Like, sort of set out, these are the standards, and I think they're good. You know, these are things that I think all of us as humans would appreciate, right? Like, you show respect towards each other. You respect what's in front of you. There's a reason behind all the decisions. There's a reason behind what they're doing. And he talks a lot about this and being engaged and pursuing that conversation. I mean, Jeff and I very well know how much Rick loves to talk, right? Like, I mean, the number of media, you know, there aren't a ton of reporters on the road these days, but when they do come by, like, you know, Randy, I think it was Randy Hahn from the San Jose Sharks for Christmas. He goes, wow, what a, you know, holy smokes. And I was like, man, every day, 12 minutes. Like, it is amazing how much Rick likes to talk. And he in many ways, I've never really asked him this, but I you know, there is a bit of a, you know, almost a sort of a hockey evangelist. He wants us to, he's trying to sell the game all the time, and he believes in it. Like, he's a true believer, and he's very authentic. I really have come to believe this, talking to people around. Like, he is what he seems to be. He for lack of a better terms, gives a shit about other people. Like, he cares, and he wants to know that people are doing well, and that he's there to support people. And I think it's pretty clear that the players have responded to that. It's no accident that he knows as many people as he does, and he has so much respect. I mean, the other thing, you know, I texted with Jim Rutherford a bit about this, and I said, listen, he just seems like he's been such an interesting person to get to know, and basically Jim said, I can believe that, you know, I had the same experience 11, 12 years ago. Like, the guy is just, he is a person who cares. As Jim told me, this was the coach that the players went to when they were in Pittsburgh. You know, he was a guy that if I have an issue or I'm trying to figure something out, they would go to him. You know, Brandon Sutter told me this before New Year's when I had a quick little chat with him about I wrote a hockey numbers thing about sort of Canucks success at tipping pucks. But the other thing that came up, he said, man, that Rick Tocchet is just the nicest guy, and he understands the game, and he cares about his players, and it's a positive effect on everybody.
Patrick, you've seen it as well. Like, it's not even the work that he does at the podium, or if we scrum him. It's when that breaks down. Usually, in my experience, most coaches, it's exit stage left. Like, they've done when they talk it. It's like he wants it to continue. Yeah. And the number of times, just small talk. And I've told the story to others. Were you there the day at UBC? I can't remember if you were part of that.
Yeah.
So there were about 6 or 8 media guys out at UBC after a practice, and we did all the official business, and it broke down. And on Rick's way out, somebody just asked him about being a net front presence in his playing days. And all of a sudden, he was grabbing guys, the media members. All right, you stand here. You're the defenseman.
Yeah,
you know, you're another forward. And then he started to show us, like, and he had his glove and his stick, and he started to show us body position and how he liked to, you know, try to. It was incredible. It went for 10 minutes. The PR department was standing there completely helpless, probably freaking out. But it was just a guy that was sharing experiences that none of us had of playing in the NHL. It was incredible. Like, it really, like, class was in session. It was fitting that it was out of UBC.
Yeah, and he has an understanding of how to explain things, you know. And I you know, I always used to say, I think I've said this before here, but I've always said, you know, that there's the players who can do it but have no idea what it worked. There's the players who can't do it but know why it worked. There's the players who can't do it and have no idea. That's most of us. And then there's the top end, the guys who did it and understood. And Tocchet's one of those guys, and he knows, and that's why he's such a good coach. You know, you talk about. You know, there's you know, he mentioned his good buddy Wayne Gretzky as the most famous person, you know, in his phone. But you know, one of the criticisms, you know, I think we go back. Gretzky, I think, tried his best to understand how athletes learn. You know, but oftentimes those elite guys, because they could just do it, it was hard for them to understand how how you get better, and Tocchet has clearly, since he retired, even obviously when he was playing, was trying to figure out how the game works. How do these things come together? What is the point of all this? Why are you teaching these things? What is the base element of what is offense about? People will scoring goals. I said, well, how do you score a goal? I don't know. You're trying to break apart the defense. You have to break apart the defense to create the opportunities, right? And he's a guy that thinks about this all the time. Adam Foote brought this up to me when I was talking to him before Christmas for the story I did on Foote. He just said, man, the way Rick explains stuff is just, he's so on point and so insightful. And it delivers, right? Like, his teams play well. They play well. It's fun, exciting hockey. The players are enjoying themselves and they're getting results.
Coaching a big part on the 7-game road trip. Quickly before you go, over under on wins here, given the given the schedule and the opponents, it's not going to be easy.
Well, I told Chappie on that for Province Sports. We have a discussion every week, and we talked about this. And I said I went and said 5-2, so I'm going to have to stick with that.
Wow.
It's going to be a big trip, but there's it's even that New York stretch. The 3 and 4. They're not, I haven't actually double checked if they're moving hotels. The last time they did it, they actually did move hotels for each game. Even that is barely anything, right? Like, there's you can handle that. They're in St. Louis to New York will, Vancouver to St. Louis is the longest part of the stretch. Then St. Louis to New York is the second longest part of the stretch, other than coming home, of course. But after that, it's Buffalo, Columbus, Pittsburgh. Like, these are all very short flights. You're up and down. And they've got breaks in between. This entire schedule now through the rest of the season is set up for them to succeed. There's not a lot of demanding stuff in there anymore. This is obviously the longest trip. That will just be a chore, but in terms of rest and recovery, they're going to have a lot of it. And again, Rick Tocchet dialed in on all that stuff. They are going to try to optimize themselves. It was funny. I think that last chat we had, he talked so much. Or it was on the weekend. It was the last one I was there for. On the weekend, he talks so much just about taking the advice on when to travel, staying over a night, traveling in the morning, things like that. Just recognizing the importance of getting to bed, not sitting in a plane after a game. All these things, they are trying to optimize themselves as much as they can. And I've come to think that that's part of the story on this season. They're doing all the smart things, and they're getting the results because of it. So 5-2.
Delightful, insightful as usual. Thank you, Patrick. We'll talk to you next week.
Always, guys. Take care.
This Harrison Price clip brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And remember,
it's all good at Applewood.